Look, you won the French Open twice. How much of a blow do you think this could be for Novak?
Well, look, I think the landscape seems to be shifting a little bit for Novak. Look, in November, it was announced here that you'd had to be vaccinated to get in here, and that seems like that changed. The government's offered a medical exemption. It's unclear whether that will be the case in the other majors or not, but certainly news, as you pointed out, for Novak, that as of this very moment, unvaccinated players will not be allowed to compete at Roland Garros. That would be huge. I mean, his career his career could be on the line if the governments take a hard line and he continues to remain unvaccinated.
And then you've got to wonder if that does happen with the French Open, what happens with Wimbledon and the US Open. I mean, surely he can't miss those as well.
Well, you wouldn't think so. You hope not. But, you know, again, he'll have to make that call on to whether he wants to continue to remain unvaccinated. Unfortunately for him, he doesn't work in a job that he can work remotely from. He has to be on site to play, to get paid, to do what he does. So it's a hard place for him to be right now, and things can change. You know, things may change. We don't know. We have no idea of knowing which way the government winds are going to blow. They seem to be shifting all the time, don't they?
Yeah. Oh, look, there's an old adage, Jim, any publicity is good publicity, right? But so far as the Australian Open is concerned, making these headlines around the world, it wasn't flash to some extent. Craig Tiley now is under the pump. What do you think about his future and the calls for him to resign?
No, look, I think the way that I'm looking at this, it's pretty clear that Novak did what was expected of him. He was clear that he was unvaccinated, or at least he was clear that he wasn't going to reveal his status, which is always a tip that you are unvaccinated. He was also clear that he wanted to play. Tennis Australia did their job. Their job is to try and help the players gain entry to the tournament. Tennis Australia is not the government. They do not issue visas. They do not allow players to cross borders. So I don't know that you can lay this at the feet of Craig or Tennis Australia. Their job is to help this wonderful tournament thrive, and you need to do that by having the best players in the world. So I'm not exactly sure, unless there's some underhanded things that happen that we're not aware of, which I highly doubt, knowing Craig and his integrity. I don't think we're going to uncover any untoward business coming from Tennis Australia. I'd like to know more about how the government's wires got crossed and how they allowed this situation to get to where it got.
There's an absolute Barney brewing here, because it seems to me the Health Minister, Greg Hunt, sent Tennis Australia some information saying that he wouldn't be allowed for these reasons, and then they've persisted with it. But as you say, these approvals come from government sources, so it is going to be so interesting to see how that all plans out. Aside from all of that, a big sigh because the tennis has started, and how good to have the crowds and that atmosphere back in Melbourne, for one of the world's great tournaments.
It's such a relief in a way to get the tournament started after everything that tennis has gone through here in the last couple of weeks. And what a sight it was to see Ash Barty playing so well and looking so confident and comfortable on Rod Laver Arena last night. That was magnificent. Rafael Nadal looked healthy. He looked good. He looked fierce. So there's some really nice things for all of us to take in yesterday. Some successes by some local Aussies like young Alex Vucic. That was fun to see. So, look, I'm excited. It's only going to get better from here, I think.
And John Millman, he also had a good night, but, I mean, he has a pretty difficult road ahead, right?
Yeah, no, John has a difficult road ahead. He has Alexander Zverev, the #3 seed, next. But it was a terrific win for John last night over a Margaret Court Arena. He played well against the veteran Feliciano Lopez. So all things considered, it was nice to see John smiling, too. He told us afterwards how difficult it's been for him and for the fellow Aussies to compete in the era of COVID with all the travel restrictions, and certainly the restrictions that players like John have faced in leaving Australia and then trying to get back home. So I think a palpable relief on his face, not only from winning the match, but in the fact that right now it seems to be a little easier to travel.
He's such a lovely dude, John Millman, too, like a really lovely fella. Look, Nick Kyrgios is up tonight. It'll be great to see. I mean, get your popcorn ready.
That's right. 7 o'clock, he'll be out just over here at John Cain Arena, which is his preferred court. It's the people's court. All you need is a ground pass to get in there. So looking forward to seeing a lot of Aussies in there to give him a lot of support, and he's going to need it. You know, unfortunately, he contracted COVID recently, so he probably hasn't had the run-up he would like. He hasn't been able to play a match this year. So the good news for him, he's playing a qualifier. Liam Brody, who's ranked outside the top 100. But the bad news is the qualifier, Liam Brody, has won 3 matches to get here, and they're sometimes dangerous. But Nick is the entertainer. He will entertain us tonight. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, that's always great. And, of course, Alex de Minaur, he's on the court as well.
De Minaur is such a wonderful fighter, and he's had some match play this year. He's looked really good. He had a terrific win over Matteo Berrettini up at the ATP Cup in Sydney, where you guys are today. And that was earlier this year, so he hopefully will come in with a fair bit of confidence. And Alex, he will engage the crowd too, so looking forward to seeing him get back out there.
It's so good to watch you, mate. You're the best at what you do, and it's terrific to have you back on our screens at one of the world's great tournaments. Thanks, Jim. We'll talk to you a little bit later in the tournament. Appreciate it.
Well, the wheels have well and truly come off the Novak Djokovic bandwagon. The Serbian star arriving home overnight and facing another Grand Slam blow. This time, the French Open, indicating the unvaxxed star will not be welcome at Roland Garros.
And back here, there are growing calls for Tennis Australia boss Craig Tiley to resign over his handling of the saga. Let's dive into it all with Nine presenter Alicia Loxley, who's at Melbourne Park. Hey, Alicia. And in Brizzy, 4BC's Scott Emerson.
Morning.
G'day to you, Scotty. Alicia, to you first of all. Let's start with Novak now. The French Open is turning into a huge problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. I think only a week ago, the health minister over there had said that they couldn't see an issue to Novak competing in this year's French Open. And as we know, he's aiming to go ahead of Federer as well as Nadal in claiming that record 21st Grand Slam title. And that's what he was hoping to do here, and was hoping for a more friendly reception when he got to the French Open. But a law has just been passed, as you'd be aware, that means that if you are going to be competing in an event like that or even entering the Roland Garros compound, you will need to be vaccinated. Now, this all could change because there is a presidential election coming up there ahead of the French Open, but it looks like there are going to be bigger implications for Novak, and then it means, you know, what will his next step be? Will he eventually just have to get vaccinated? We know he's a fierce competitor, and you can't see him giving up tennis anytime soon.
No.
And that's, it raises the question too, Scott. I mean, you've got Wimbledon, the US Open also coming up this year. His career is potentially on the line here.
Well, and it's a career and his place in history as well, because, look, as was just mentioned there, Nadal and Federer and Djokovic, all on 20 Grand Slams at the moment. Now, potentially, Nadal, he could win the Australian Open, had a great win yesterday. He could get the 21 and take the lead, become the greatest tennis player of all time. Djokovic, out of the Australian Open, out of the French Open now, Wimbledon, US Open. In the end, he might lose out on that chance of claiming to be the greatest tennis player of all time. Everyone thought, given his age and his performance, he'd be the one to get that 21, 22 Grand Slams. Now, as you say, he's a great competitor. Could it be that in the end he is forced to get the vaxxed just to get that place in history?
Well, nothing will challenge his commitment to anti-vaxxing more than the threat to his own legacy. Hey, Alicia, on the issue, Tennis Australia, Craig Tiley, he's been asked to resign. Whether or not he will have to take the fall is another question. There's a lot to be talked through here. What do you think in Melbourne is the thing that people are talking about there in relation to his resignation potentially?
It's really interesting, Karl. If we go back 12 months, and the fact that Craig Tiley was so instrumental in pulling off last year's Australian Open, he was being courted by the IOC ahead of the Tokyo Olympics. And I think he is an amazing sports administrator. And I think he was doing his job. He was trying to get the best tennis players here in the world. I think we need to hear from the Tennis Australia board. I think it's been interesting that we haven't heard from Jane Herdlicker at all over the past couple of days. And look, I think there was absolutely confusion. There was confusion when we went to press conferences and we tried to say, is Novak Djokovic going to be allowed in or not? And this was months ago. And the state government was saying, well, it's a Commonwealth issue. If they let him in the door, then we'll have to look at whether he gets an exemption to play. And the the Commonwealth government was also sort of duck shoving, saying, well, this is a state government issue. And so I think Craig Tiley, at the end of the day, was doing all he could, and there is communication from immigration that there was confusion, and I think he's excellent.
And look, Jim Courier was just on our show only a few moments ago, and he sort of made a similar point to what you're saying there, Alicia, that mistakes were made, but he feels the mistakes were made at a government level. Scott, where do you sit on this one? I mean, it has been very strange that we haven't heard from Tennis Australia, though, in what feels like a long time. Yeah,
Craig Tiley, Jane Herdlicker, the chairman of Tennis Australia. I think there's a lot of questions they need to answer. Oh, look, I appreciate that Craig is a great sports administrator and was doing everything possible to get the #1 men's tennis player to Melbourne. But maybe he went too far, was looking for loopholes. He was looking for that loophole of an exemption because Novak Djokovic apparently had tested positive for COVID in the last 6 months. But looking at how this whole thing was handled, not just by the federal government, obviously there was questions raised about their performance as well, but from Tennis Australia, were they looking for any possible way to get Novak Djokovic into Australia, and they went too far? Unfortunately, you've seen many successful careers fall apart because of one poor choice, one poor decision. That could be the case for Craig Tiley.
I'm with Alicia on this. I think that his job is to try and put together the best tournament possible, to try and get the best players from around the world to a tournament, to his tournament, which is, without question, one of the best at it in the world, Craig Tiley. OK, so he's obviously gone to every length he can to get the best players. Is that his job to deny someone? Is that his job to release a visa? Is that his job to check Novak Djokovic when he comes into the country?
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have thought so.
I guess the issue here is, Karl, was he saying to Novak Djokovic, this is the way we can get you in? We'll get you in with this exemption, even though there was clear evidence from Greg Hunt telling Tennis Australia, no, that's not how you're going to get in. That's not the rules. What was Tennis Australia saying to Novak Djokovic to convince him to come, to say, yeah, you'll be able to get you through the borders? That is the issue. OK,
and the other issue is this. Does it reflect, Alicia, and this is the sticky point for Craig Tiley, the bad PR surrounding this tournament globally, is that enough to suggest that maybe his position needs looking at, or does it in a strange way kind of all work?
Oh, look, I don't think the only thing I think where they could sort of question, like there's absolute evidence that they said to the players, you need to get your COVID positive test in by December 10. There's that timeline. So if you've tested positive for COVID, you've got to get that paperwork in by then. They allowed him another 6 days. Now, do you allow the world's #1 player another 6 days? Probably. And look, yes, there was communication from Greg Hunt, and there were 2 letters, weren't there, saying this is not necessarily an exemption, that if you've had a COVID positive diagnosis. However, there was another letter from immigration saying, well, that's a state government decision, whether you let him play or whether there's a quarantine attached to that. So it was conflicting. And I think we will hear from Craig Tiley in the coming days. There's obviously a lot going on, and they need to be careful, but people have been leaking against each other in this, as always happens. And I just think the confusion that was coming, that he could not get advice, and all I know is, as journalists, we could not get a clear answer from either government about how this issue was going to be played out. And to me, it was simple. It was like he's either allowed in or not. And so it's just, I don't know.
I still don't think there's a lot to come. That is very clear to most of us, exactly, who's responsible for what and all of this. I
think it'd be a great shame to see Craig Tiley go.
But imagine the pressure he was under to get Novak Djokovic the world #1 here in Australia.
But he wants Novak here, right? So he's moving heaven and earth to make his tournament the best in the country. And so, of course, he's going to push. I don't see how that's a resignation. I don't see how that's a sacking. I think give the guy some latitude to make his tournament the best it can be, and also he's not at the behest of the Australian public. It's the Australian government who decides these things. I don't know. I think it's going too far to say he should go. That's just my opinion.
This is why I just wonder why at the end of the day were those two independent health panels set up anyway?
Yeah.
If the Commonwealth was going to come in over the top and saying we're at the border, we decide, well, guess what? Take responsibility 3 months ago and claim that.
Yeah.
Rather than sort of ducking and waiting to see what was going to happen. That's why it's such a mess.
G'day, it's Ali.
And Karl.
Thanks for watching the Today YouTube channel.
Subscribe now for brand new videos every day and exclusive bonus clips.
Ali, say please.
Please? Why?
Please? I don't know.